Hello everybody, it's Miss Lee again. I wanted to post a quick video about how we can generate points for certain graphs, what the basic shape we expect to see for certain families of functions should be, and then just sort of give us some tips for when we're graphing in MyLab's math on your homework, because that is what I received the most questions about this week, were the graphing and the graphing tools inside of the software we use for our homework. So if we have a function that looks like f of x equals x plus 7 or f of x equals 3x minus 9, these are both linear functions. We know they're linear functions because they only have this one variable of x in them. These x's have that understood 1 as their exponent, so therefore they are linear functions. And most of our traditional linear functions either look like this increasing line or something like this decreasing line. Where they're placed on the coordinate plane will depend on the function itself. So when we go to graph a function like this, let's say we were working with this function right here. When you are walking through your homework in MyLab's math, it will prompt you to do something like this, where it's going to give you a partially completed t-table. Our job will be to complete that t-table and then use the graphing tools to create our graph in the coordinate plane that it asks us to create it in. So of course when we're going to do this completion, our job is to plug this x value into this function to get its output value. So if we have 3 times 1 minus 9, well that's 3 minus 9, so a value of negative 6. So you'd type in negative 6, 3 and 0 minus 9, so 0 minus 9 to get negative 9. Again, we write that here, 3 and negative 2 minus 9 to give us negative 6 minus 9 to get a negative 15. And so once you have this table completed, these are our three ordered pairs. When you are in MyLab's math and you are going to graph something, you'll select the linear function tool or the linear graph tool, so it'll have a little icon that has this sort of picture on it. And to use this icon's tool, you only need 2 points. So even though it may have asked you to find 3 or 4 or 5 points, you can select any 2 of them to use in this tool to graph it. So when it pops up that coordinate plane in your window, you could select the point 1, negative 6, and then select the point 0, negative 9, and it should create the graph of this function 3x minus 9 for you in the window that you're working with. If we have a function like f of x is equal to x squared minus 7 or negative 3x squared plus 1, these functions, because they have these variables that are second degree quantities as the highest exponent in the equation, are a family of quadratic functions. Quadratic functions have this basic parabolic shape. Again, their placement in the coordinate plane will depend on the function itself. And to graph them, again, we're going to have to walk through that same process where we're plugging in values for x. If they don't give us a t-table to complete, then it will be our job to create the full table ourselves by picking x values and then solving for f of x. So here, I didn't put in numbers, but let's just generate a few on our own. So let's say we wanted to graph this function right here. F of x is equal to x squared minus 7. If we didn't remember about transformations and how those work, we could still graph this using a basic t-table. So we could plug in something like 0 and 2 and negative 1. These are the values I felt like picking for x, but you can pick any value that you feel like picking for x if you're creating your own table. If MyLab's math gives you a somewhat completed table where they've given you x's, then they want you to find the output value of those specific x's. And just like before, we would plug it into the function and see what our output values are. So here we would have 0 squared minus 7, which is just 0 minus 7, so negative 7. 2 squared minus 7, so 4 minus 7, which would be negative 3. And then negative 1 squared minus 7, which is positive 1 minus 7, which is still negative 6. So here we would fill in those values. If you had to then graph this in MyLab's, you would use the parabolic function little tool. I believe for that tool in MyLab's Plus, it wants 3 points. So you would select this tool, Then on your coordinate plane, you would click on these 3 points individually, and that should create for you this graph that is this function x squared minus 7.